Hello, my wonderful viewers, and welcome to another episode of Betty Adams Overanalyzes. Today, we are going to take a look at Lost in Space, Season 3, Episode 6. I will have a short, spoiler-free version, and then I will warn you when I'm about to get into spoilers. Now, this episode, in my humble opinion, this was the best episode out of the lot. I also suspect that it was the episode that was changed the least from the intended 10-episode arc. And, oh my goodness, this was the most painful episode. I've rewatched it multiple times, and I've never been able to watch it straight through. This episode is an example of the writers building up something beautiful over the course of 2.5 seasons. The writers, they gave you something wonderful and beautiful and real and true to life, at the same time fantastic. The writers gave you something that shouldn't be in a pulp sci-fi movie. This should be in a great work of literature, sitting dusty and aging on a library somewhere where thousands of copies of it are being pulled to death by eager hands reading it over and over and over again. This is something that should have been in a work of Tolkien. This is this beautiful thing the writers gave us. It should have been in Tolstoy or the other Russian guy. This is a work of emotion and relationship that the likes of which would stand with anything since the Chinese started writing novels 3,000 years ago, or whenever that started. And yet we get it here in an art form because the writers understood what kind of show they were watching. This is the same show where we watched 3 kids improvise a wingsuit out of a tent and fly up to the top of the mountain. They know what kind of show they're writing. And they didn't use that as an excuse to back off. They told a good story. I keep going back to C.S. Lewis's quote about don't try to be original. Don't try to be just write a good story. Create something good. The author in episode 6, the writers of Lost in Space did that. They spent 2.5 episodes giving us something beautiful, and then they held it up in front of our eyes and broke it into a million tiny pieces. And of course it will be healed, but it will never be the same. And that was heartbreaking. And it was so perfect because, let's be honest, we know that all of the main characters have plot armor. We know that they're going to resurrect Scarecrow off scene, after the credits. We know that none of the Robinsons are going to die. We know that at the end of this show, Debbie the chicken will be pecking happily at grain, while the rest of the Robinsons, including Robinson, are around her. We know the main characters can't die. So how do you add stakes? Well, very simply, the main characters might not be able to die in a show like this, but their relationships can. You can totally these shows allow for the breaking of relationships. Even if you suspect it's not going to be permanent, just knowing that the relationship will never be the same, knowing that trust was broken, knowing that looking at these characters, seeing them it's just so good for the writing. You see characters fail. You see characters abdicate responsibility. And as a result of it, the relationship is severely wounded. And it makes for a better, well-rounded character. These are not perfect paragons of virtue that we're looking at, even though we wanted them to be. And again, this is the spoiler-free section. This episode gave us stunning visual effects, CGI that I do believe will stand the test of time. This gave us plot twists and plot development. It gave us character development. It gave us characters rising to the moment and using their powers for good when they've used them for evil. And this episode has it all. It has plot development, it has character development, it has heartbreaking tragedy. And it's just really, really good. Okay, so I'd say if you're only going to watch one episode, watch this one, but it's so dependent on the rest of the series and not in a bad way. I really can't suggest that. But anyway, the CGI was good. This is one of the episodes that I believe was written in its nascent form at the beginning of the series. This episode was a clear image in the mind of one of the writers before they'd finished writing the first episode. They knew that they were working towards this goal, towards this moment of heartbreaking confrontation. And the skill that went into writing this episode and the skill that went into depicting it, and oh my goodness, all of the actors. The child actors, Will's actor does a great job. I mean, he is superb for a child actor, but the adults just shine in this moment. There's so much that goes on just in little glances. None of them are you don't feel like none of them are acting. They're experiencing these emotions. And however much they're paying, what's his name, who plays John Robinson, it's probably not enough. I mean, that man can act and emote, and oh my goodness, it was so good. Anyway, that is the spoiler-free version. Now we're getting into the spoiler version. While we go from the spoiler-free to the spoiler version, to give you time to click away so you don't have to hear any spoilers, you can go check out the links below my video, get a copy of my book, Humans Are Weird. I have the data, and Humans Are Weird, we took a vote. Available in large print now, but on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and available in all other formats on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. You can get an author-signed copy by emailing me at my website, and you can, of course, get electronic versions at Kobo and Google Play. And the physical copies of my books are now being carried by Walmart if you want to go to walmart.com, which was a surprise to me because I didn't arrange to have them put there. But hey, if they sell, they sell. All right, now, spoilers. This is, of course, the episode where Will gets stabbed in the heart by Sar. And you get the revelation, of course, that Sar killed the creators. And it really did come as a surprise plot twist to me. It's not the kind of plot twist that's shocking because it was very well prepared and led up to it. And there was clearly more going on behind the scenes with these robots than the humans were assuming. And even in this episode, it shows that the humans are still making assumptions, especially Will. He's so young and innocent. He called the creators extinct. Now, he saw one dead planet inhabited by what were obviously an intergalactic spacefaring species who had already terraformed at least 4 different worlds that we know of. Will assumed they were extinct, which is kind of a thing with the Robinsons, and it's just a really great character flaw for the entire family. They're all a bit arrogant in their own way. I mean, John's the one who suffers the least from this, but they make assumptions, and we don't know that the builders, the aliens that created the robots, are actually extinct, but at least their homeworld was destroyed. If there are any colonies of them left that escaped the robots, and we have no reason to assume there aren't, they're probably scattered remnants throughout the galaxy. But that was just a really interesting, solid bit of not character development, just Will Robinson made an assumption, made a mistake that is just perfectly in character for him to make from what we've seen of his character and, quite frankly, how much of his mother he has in him. So, good writing on the writer's part. You have, of course, the confrontation between Sar and his 2 minions and Will. And then you, of course, have Robot freaking out when Will gets stabbed in the heart and just brutally ending both of them. They're probably not dead by Robot standards, but the scene where Robot's melting the face of the one on the ground, this is clearly a rage-fueled active, well, maybe not. Maybe it was just practically what he needed to do to immobilize the robot to protect the rest of the family. But there was clearly rage in Robot's actions when he was doing that. And it raises so many questions. Like, that one robot that scanned Dawn totally could have killed him. It didn't even act aggressively, but the big black one who scanned him, it didn't even act aggressively towards Dawn until Dawn came at it with the knife, and then it just basically shoved Dawn out of the way. It didn't thermal blast him, it just shoved him out of the way. And given that this robot we've seen has this one of the same abilities as Scarecrow, it's not entirely possible that he might be the same frame type as Scarecrow and might have some of Scarecrow's willingness to interact with other species, of sort of curiosity and wonder about the world. But that's all pure speculation on my part. But there was definitely restraint in the robot's behavior. It didn't even try to immobilize Dawn. It just came up and scanned him. And now we see Robot just brutalizing him. And it makes me wonder if one of the scenes that we were going to get in the cut episodes was one of Robot maybe confronting that some of these other robots were not as ruthless and heartless as SAR was, and that they would have been willing to communicate or talk if given a chance. Of course, this was a hot combat situation, and Robot did not really have time, even had he wanted to try to communicate with the other larger robot. So who knows? But the scene, the scene that really hurt on a deep fundamental level, the scene that I still have not been able to watch all the way through. I keep having to pause it and breathe. All through season 1 and season 2, they built up this relationship between John and the robot. And John, I did whole videos on this. John was the only one who was really considering the robot. Will assumed he had full control over the robot, and we find out later that Will was just straight up wrong. What Will had was an empathic bond with the robot, not any kind of control over him. Robot flat out says that to SAR in the flashback that we see in this episode. Will was never in control of Robot. That's been confirmed. It's canon. But everyone but John assumed that Will did have control over it. And there was this scene in the beginning of season 1 where Robot's helping to dry out the ship. And if you'll recall, this is before the empathic bond formed. And John is understandably skeptical of Robot's intentions. And John comes up to Robot while he's working and just stands in front of them. And they're just standing there face to face. And Robot doesn't flinch. He just stares there unblinkingly at John with his face in a red threat analysis display. And John's finally the one who has to take a deep breath, turn his head away, and leave the situation because Robot won't back down in front of him. And that was kind of the first hint that we got that John was going to have the most understanding relationship with Robot. Maureen makes her assumptions and then stops thinking about people. That's how she's dealt with people her entire life. She decides who they are, where they fit into her life, and then she's shocked if they go step out of that. And that's been, as we've seen, that's her major character flaw that's caused the issues in her relationships with both of her daughters and her son. Will stepped out of the protected baby role. Penny stepped out of the thoughtlessly fun daughter role, and Judy stepped out of the responsible older daughter role, and each time it was a complete shock to Maureen. Meanwhile, John was fully aware of his own limitations, but was always watching and always interacting with everybody, and this included Robot. And over season 1 and season 2, John goes from being deeply suspicious of what to him is obviously another soldier, obviously another warrior, but he's the one who risks his life fighting the guards to free Robot from the mind probe in the Resolute. John's the one who tries to get up off of his medical bed and go to Robot when they find Robot again. John was the one who was actively caring for Robot and showing his love through his actions. And you have, just keep that in mind, that scene from season 1, early on, not in the first episode, but as the story is getting on, you have that scene where John faces down Robot, and then John turns away because he just can't. He's got other work to do, and he can't fathom the situation. Now, we're 3 seasons in. We're at a bookend. So the concept being that this scene is about equidistance from the end of the series, as that scene was distant from the beginning of the series. And here you have another situation where John is confronting Robot. This is after Will has been stabbed. Will's in the medical bay. John is, at this point, helpless. He doesn't have the medical knowledge to help with a medical issue of this severity. He's watching Judy do the work. Maureen and Penny are helping Judy. Dawn's out somewhere trying to get the ship ready, and John turns around and confronts Robot. And John and Robot had this beautiful developing relationship where John trusted the robot and the robot trusted John, and the robot clearly had this affection for John, and John betrays that, and it's perfectly well written, because a perfect hero would have turned aside at that moment, seen that Robot was suffering with guilt over what had happened to Will, and the perfect hero, the perfect father, would have turned around, put his arm on Robot's arm, just like he did when he'd rescued him from the Resolute, and offered comfort to Robot, and offered to comfort Robot. And instead, John is filled with rage, and he just lashes out at Robot. Now, in of this itself, this is an interesting action because it's an act of trust. John trusts that Robot is not going to defend himself. John trusts that Robot is not going to show any negative reaction. John knows that Robot is in pain and vulnerable, and so it is both an act of trust and of betrayal on John's part. And it's a serious act of betrayal. It is a heartbreaking act of betrayal, but it's so perfectly human and so perfectly understandable. You know why John is doing this. He is blaming himself for not watching Will closely enough. He's just begun to reform his relationship with his son, and this happens, and he lashes out at the handiest available target. But just look at how the scene plays out. John stalks up to Robot just like he did in that early episode, but this time Robot backs down. He doesn't stand there and wait for John to come up to him. Robot is receding. Robot is showing John that kind of he's in control of the situation. Robot is admitting his guilt. He is showing that he doesn't have a leg to stand on. He's backing down. And then when John starts punching him, Robot turns his head away because he can't look John in the face. And Robot just quietly sits there and lets John punch him until John just breaks down sobbing. And only once John leaves the situation will Robot allow himself to turn away and go basically hide in the corner in shame. And this was, again, it was so perfectly written from a storytelling perspective. It is literally heartbreaking. They had this relationship, and the relationship was young and fragile, but they trusted each other. They cared for each other. They loved each other. And now, because John is not the perfect hero, because he's just a human, just a father, fails in this heroic moment, and Robot, because he has this inherent sense of justice, because Robot's feeling guilt, he just lets John pound him. Robot is being the bigger person here, and the guilt of letting that happen to Will is so crippling for Robot that he just locks down, and then Dr. Smith has to use her powers to get him out of his funk and get him to get the ship into space. And then that's where the episode ends. But oh my goodness, this was undoubtedly my favorite episode and the most painful one to watch. It was so well written. It was so tragic. And it's just an example of the way a good writer works, not only works within the limitations of their medium, but works with the limitations of their medium. You don't expect anything truly horrible to happen in a kid family-friendly sci-fi western like this. But horrible things can happen, even given the strict limitations that they're under. Nobody died, But a relationship did die. That wholesome, innocent relationship between John and Robot, where John was treating him like a member of the family, protecting him. John betrayed that. And of course, we know this is a family movie. They will repair their relationship, but it will be a repaired relationship. It will never be what it could have been had John been the perfect hero in that moment. But he's not the perfect hero. He is a flawed, fallible human being who gave into the most understandable of human weaknesses and destroyed something beautiful because of it. And so that is my 2 cents on Lost in Space, Season 3, Episode 6. What do you think? Was this the most perfect relationship death you've ever seen in a sci-fi western? Leave a comment below telling me what you took out of this episode. Hit that like and subscribe button. Check to make sure you're still subscribed, because YouTube will accidentally unsubscribe you. And peace out, my wonderful viewers. Humans are weird. We took a vote, and humans are weird. I have the data. 2 books in a series of human absurdity. Go check out these short story collections. What will our little green friends think of us when we finally do make it to space? Find out the answer in 2 books of human absurdity. Humans Are Weird, We Took a Vote, and Humans Are Weird, I Have the Data. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kobo, and Google Play.